Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of South Carolina.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for November the 19th, episode number 1892. We've got a great show lined up for you today. In just a couple of minutes, we will be joined by my good friend from thebigspur.com, Alex Jones. Obviously, a lot to get to, particularly in the wake of South Carolina's historic meltdown at College Station on Saturday. In case you missed it, in case you were under a rock or you've just given up on watching the Gamecocks, South Carolina was up 30-3 at halftime. 285 other times. So 286 times Southeastern Conference teams led their opponent by 27 or more points at halftime. You know how many times they had lost? 0, zip, none, nada, goose egg, 0. 286-0, but forever in perpetuity, it'll probably be 486-1 15 years from now, and the one will be South Carolina. It won't even be Shane Beamer. It'll be South Carolina. An utterly embarrassment and a stain on the University of South Carolina's football program. All right, today's show is brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte area. I'm talking about Nana's Porch. If you want to take the bad taste out of your mouth from Saturday's meltdown and what just had to be like eating a turd sandwich, whatever your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, a birthday, graduation, engagement, or anniversary celebration, maybe it'll be a watch party for Coastal or Clemson, whatever your catering needs, Nana's Porch has got you covered. So go to the homepage, nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. Tell him the good folks over at Gamecock Pod Live sent you. And I strongly urge you to support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. And if you don't have a catering event, you can still support Nana's Porch by going to the homepage, looking in the top right-hand portion, click on pimento cheese, and you can order plenty of Nana's Porch award-winning pimento cheese. Both great flavors, the regular flavor and my personal favorite, smoky jalapeno, reasonably priced. Checkout is simple, safe, and secure. They'll ship it right to your front doorstep. Nana's Porch, award-winning pimento cheese. You'll love it. I guarantee it. All right, so let's get into some news and notes of the day before we bring in the Iron Man, Alex Jones, and the pride of Hampton County. So last night, men's basketball defeated Radford 87-58 to go 4-0 on the season. The Gamecocks shot 57.6% and were 34 for 59 from the field. Both of those, as far as field goal percentage and made field goals, those are first in the Lamont Paris era at South Carolina. But the Gamecocks have scored 80 or more points in the first 4 games of a season for the first time since the 1970-71 season. That was when John Roach and Kevin Joyce and who else? Tom Owens, John Reebok, Bob Carver, all of those guys. And that is the year South Carolina won the ACC championship. Kevin Joyce in Charlotte. Kevin Joyce, that's back when they jumped it up just like in the NBA. Kevin Joyce had tied up North Carolina's All-American center Lee Dedman, who was 6'9". And Frank McGuire called timeout. There was going to be a jump ball in Carolina's circle with 2 seconds to go. And Frank McGuire told Kevin Joyce, who, by the way, was his godson and was also the number 1 player in the country coming out of high school, he said, "Jump to the moon, Kevin." Kevin Joyce went up. He kind of stole the tap, tipped it to Tom Owens. Owens laid it off the glass, and the Gamecocks beat North Carolina. I was 7 years old. So that's a long time ago. All right. Men's basketball, Lamont Paris over the weekend officially announced the signing of Ohio's Mr. Basketball, Marcus Johnson, the first cousin of Meechie Johnson. I'm pretty sure he is the 2-time Ohio Gatorade Player of the Year and the 2025 Mr. Basketball. He is a top 50 player nationally and a consensus 4-star recruit, and is considered the number 3 point guard in the country. As a junior, he averaged 23 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.4 assists, and 2 steals. And he was Mr. Basketball as a sophomore when he averaged 29.2 points. Well, I'm sorry, that was his sophomore year. He won it again last year as a junior. He averaged 29.2 points, 4.9 rebounds, 3.2 assists, and 1.9 steals per game. Johnson is the second highest rated player to sign with Lamont Paris and the Gamecocks, second only to G.G. Jackson. All right, women's basketball ranked number 2 in both the AP and the coaches poll. They are back in action tonight at the CLA. They will take on Winthrop at 7 p.m. The game will be televised on the SEC network. Gamecocks are fresh off a 69-52 beatdown of Southern Cal in the battle for the real SC that was played in Los Angeles at the Lakers Arena. South Carolina held Southern Cal to just 22 second half points and broke it open in the third quarter after leading by just 2 at the half, 32-30. For her performance in that game and the Clemson game, Joyce Edwards was named the SEC Player of the Week. She leads the team with 18 points per game. Edwards had her first double-double on the season with 17 points and 10 rebounds against the Trojans. Men's basketball also expected today to sign Isaac Ellis, the younger brother of Eli Ellis, who recently broke Eli's scoring record by going for 56 points in one of the first games of the season. All right, so last night, Gamecocks placed 4 players in double figures in that 87-58 win over Radford. Elijah Strong off the bench. He must have listened to my pod last week because that dude needed to play better. He did. He was 7 of 10 from the field, 1 of 2 from downtown. He had 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 block shot in just 18 minutes. Eli Ellis, also off the bench, 14 points, 5 of 8 from the field, 4 of 4 from the free throw line, 3 rebounds and 3 assists for him. Only 1 turnover in 27 minutes. Mongolian Mike Sherjamps, he had 12 points on 4 of 5 shooting, 2 of 3 from downtown and 2 of 2 from the field. He also had 10 rebounds and 2 assists in 22 minutes. Kobe Knox in double figures, 10 points, 2 of 5 from the field, 6 of 6 from the free throw line. The Gamecock bench really spurred on the Gamecocks, and the Gamecocks had a bunch of bench points. South Carolina will hit the road for the first time this season and head to West Virginia to play in the Skechers Briar Cup tip-off. Gamecocks will face Butler on Friday and Northwestern on Sunday. Both games will air on the CBS Sports Network. All right, so really liked what the Gamecock men's basketball did last night and has done. South Carolina's women's basketball picking up a big road win at Southern Cal. Raven Johnson playing her best basketball of her career right now. She had 14 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists at the battle for the real SC. And now you can just call South Carolina women's basketball USC and call Southern Cal SoCal. I think in all sports now, over all time, they've only played 4 times. South Carolina is undefeated against the Trojans, including a 38-14 beatdown in 1983 by Joe Morrison with the split back veer. Kent Haygood and Thomas Dendy ran all over those dudes and the fire ant defense. And that's the night they played 2001, and the electricity was so thick in the air, you felt like you could have cut it with a knife. I still remember James Brown with his blue jeans, his cowboy boots, and his leather jacket, and his slick back hair roaming the sidelines behind the Gamecock bench that night. So I just remember there was a big sign hung up that said, ain't no Trojan can hold our Cocks. And the Gamecocks certainly lived up to the deal on that one, taking down Southern Cal 38-14. And so all right. Hang on 1 second and I'll be right back. I got to send Alex the link to his email. His Twitter is acting up. So I'll be right back.
Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win. Unbelievable. I don't believe it.
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
And I'm back. And hopefully in just a minute, we will be joined by the pride of Hampton County, Alex Jones, to get his thoughts on, well, what can only be explained as a meltdown, a defeat of historically epic proportions, a choke, just a massive meltdown in College Station. Let's bring him in, the pride of Hampton County and the Iron Man, Alex Jones. What's going on, brother?
What's going on? It's good to be back with you. I don't think is there anything to talk about with football right now? I'm not sure there's a whole lot to talk about.
Man, I don't know. So have you – I mean, it's kind of like if that game would have been at Williams-Brice Stadium, they might as well have just bulldozed the stadium in on Shane Beamer. But so let's start with the good, which was the first half, as I pause for a sip of delicious hot coffee and caffeine here. A little better than the Zevia, if I don't say so myself. All right, so you're up there in the press box. I'm assuming you're watching the first half unfold, and you get a big man touchdown, Nick Barrett with the scoop and score. Then you get the 51-yard touchdown pass to Van Drevis Jacobs, or maybe that one happened first. I don't know. It's a blur.
Together.
Yeah, but now I'm watching it on TV. And so they're talking to Shane Beamer at the end of the first quarter. And file this under the headline of, I don't believe I would have said that. Shane Beamer got his chest poked out, talking about, we beat this team by 24 points last year on our field. We came in here expecting to do this. Our record is what it is, but we know what kind of football team we've got. I mean, at that point, it was 17-3. Obviously, it was 30-3 at halftime, Alex. I mean, what were you thinking when, South Carolina put up 312 yards. They ran 38 plays. And even though Lenora Sellers was just 10 for 20 passing, they already had 108 yards rushing, which is more than Texas A&M allows in a game. In the first quarter, they were 3 for 5 on third down. I mean, this was a completely different offense.
Yeah, first half thoughts, you thought, obviously South Carolina had all the momentum, but really in all three phases. And offensively, you're just like, man, that's, you're starting to wonder, like, man, could they have started to do some of this all year with things they were doing? Like, there was a lot of things they were doing from a comfortability standpoint with Sellers. There were some quick early passes. The run game was getting going early. Jawarn Howell was out there for the first snap, and that's something I'm sure we'll talk about here from a second half standpoint from a run game perspective. But there's just a lot going right. They were doing everything right defensively. Dylan Stewart made that incredible play. They were doing everything right. They were getting after Marcel Reed, which that's another thing that didn't happen in the second half. But you had that play where Dylan Stewart forced a fumble, Nick Barrett picked it up. And then you kind of just had the exclamation mark there with that last touchdown with Nick Harper. Now, there could have been potentially another touchdown and some clock management things would have been better there on that last drive after the interception, because they had Marcel Reed just completely flustered in that first half. Like, he was just completely missing open guys. They were getting after him. And so that's what led to that 33 halftime lead, and then just completely 180 for both teams at halftime. And it just completely switched. But offensively, you liked what you saw. There's a lot of things were clicking. The Sellers looked pretty good. Saw him, just quickly making a few decisions where things weren't there. He was running. But then just for the offense, defense, special teams, it just completely switched at halftime.
All right, so let's stick with the first half, because if any defensive back or linebacker had any hands at all, other than Vakari Swain, like even Jalen Kilgore dropped 2 interceptions in the first half. One, he undercut the route. It might have been a pick 6. A couple of the others would have put South Carolina inside the Texas A&M 30-yard line. And so South Carolina, they scored to go up 27-3. Then on the Nick Harbor touchdown, which we've been waiting for that. He's clearly beaten everybody deep, but that's the first time that was Sterling Sharp-like.
Yeah.
Like, he caught that pass. He made like one little hook move to get around, create some space, and off to the races. As soon as he got even with the first guy, I knew it was over, because he was getting ready to turn on the jets. He goes after the catch 65 yards more for the touchdown on the run into the Texas A&M to the tunnel, where he kind of grabs his hamstring, and then Mr. Texas Highway Patrol walks out, probably missing the white hood that is over his head when he's not at a college football game. bumps into the players and then just like goes nuts. I mean, thankfully A&M sent him home. He's not an employee, but he's a state employee, which to me is kind of concerning. Were you guys able to even see that in the press box?
So I actually was not at the game. I was not in College Station. I was watching on TV, like just about everybody else. But seeing that was just a wild moment. Like, just completely uncalled for. And it was good to see that that was handled by Texas A&M and the everybody there, because that was just completely uncalled for, and just one of the wild moments that happened, of the many wild moments that happened in this game.
All right, no doubt. So let's talk about after the second Vicari Swain interception, South Carolina takes over at the Texas A&M 23 with 33 seconds to go. And so on the first play, Lenore Sellers is flushed out of the pocket. He escapes down the right sideline, tight ropes the sideline just like he did last year, all the way down to the Texas A&M 9-yard line. So with 24 seconds to go, you had 3 timeouts. And you were on the 9-yard line. So on the first play, for whatever reason, you decide to run a play for the most athletic, skilled player on the field, Brady Hunt, who, just like Austin Stogner, gets tripped up by a grasshopper, okay, and a hand, even though he's 255 pounds. He falls down with 19 seconds to go. The clock goes down to 18. I'm expecting Shane Beamer to call timeout.
Yeah.
This is about as egregious as it gets, okay? It goes all the way down until 11 seconds. This dude wasted 7 or 8 seconds, which is essentially 2 plays when you're that close.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're watching it. I thought you were at the game. My apologies. Good for you that you were not there. I'm watching the replay, and Shane Beamer looks at the line judge and just says, "I thought it was an incomplete pass." What is going on here? Like, number one, how do you know it's incomplete? And why is everybody on the headsets not screaming timeout, timeout, timeout? To me, that is just another of one of the most egregious mismanagements of the season by Shane Beamer, of which there have been too many to even count. What is this guy thinking?
That was one of those where, like, you could see maybe if he did think it was an incomplete pass, maybe 1, 2, 3 seconds roll off the clock, and then somebody, as you said, is screaming into the headset, "Hey, clock's running, timeout." But I just don't know what was going on for that much time to run off the clock and then get down to 11 seconds and you're calling timeout. Like, it's just, that was another one of those wild things. Just because, like I said, I could see maybe 3 seconds ran off and you notice, oh, clock's running, let me call timeout. And that's 3 seconds you like to have back, but it's better than getting down all the way to 11 seconds. Because then at that point, you really hamper yourself with what you can do from a play calling standpoint, because you have to leave time for a field goal, just because you have had some struggles here in the red zone this season. But then that was just one of those moments where South Carolina, and at the moment you may not have thought it, but right there at the end of the game, you would have thought, man, that would be great for South Carolina to be able to get a touchdown there instead of a field goal. So that was just one of those moments that was not good for South Carolina in that game. And the communication at that point in the season's got. I mean, it's at this point in the season, the communication just has to be better there.
I mean, Alex, I don't understand, because the play caller is in the press box. He had to be screaming timeout. Like, I'm trying to in real time think, dude, don't tell me you're just running down the clock so there'll be no time for Texas A&M after you score, okay? I mean, it's 2nd and goal at the 9-yard line. or maybe the 8-yard line, maybe is one play.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they gave him the 7-yard line. So at second and goal, you run one play, which was an incomplete pass, and you get called for holding, and you have to kick a field goal. Like, that could have been 34-3, which, by the way, would have been enough to win. But there were other, in the first half, you got down there several times and you had to kick, 3 field goals, 2 of which the head ball coach was like, well, Alex, you get down there and you have to kick a bunch of little field goals. In the first half, it comes back to haunt you. So the first one, after you take the opening drive, 10 plays, 57 yards, you have to kick a 36-yard field goal. And then with, 2 seconds in the half, you have to kick a 35-yard field goal. By the way, Carolina, 9 first half possessions, 38 plays, 312 yards. That's usually more yards than they've had in a game. It's certainly more than they've averaged on the season.
Mm-hmm.
$286-0, Alex. 286-0. Okay, South Carolina, where the SEC leading opponents by 27 or more points at the half, had never lost a game, ever, in the history of the SEC, regardless of the opponent. Now, granted, you are playing number 3 on the road. And so if you hadn't watched this game and watched the game unfold and watch a Linda Lovelace like choke, okay, and knowing from the embarrassment of all the post-game shows that Texas A&M came back from their biggest halftime deficit in their history and that no other SEC team had ever blown a 27-point halftime lead. If you would have just seen it like that night and thought, oh, my God, Carolina, man, they gave Texas A&M hell. They only lost by 1 point. It'd be a lot easier to swallow to me, but the way this thing went down in the second half, how does Shane Beamer unpile all of that rubble? I mean, that's like being in the Empire State Building and it just imploding on top of you. How, do you think there's any way back for him from that?
It's going to be a long road just because now you got 2 really important games coming up. And obviously, back to Texas A&M real quick, too. Like, that was just, it'd be one thing if South Carolina was, and obviously that type of loss is never acceptable, but, South Carolina was a 1-loss team going in there and then things just fell apart. But this just kind of added fuel to the fire with the season, with how the season's gone and some of their second half, fourth quarter struggles. It just added fuel to the fire. And now, let's say South Carolina beats Coastal and maybe loses the class. There's so many different scenarios we could go into with Beamer's job status, I think, and say if he does come back for it next season, like there's it's going to be it's going to be a long road to kind of get back to where they were from a potential playoff team 2 years ago, just because you're going to have to hire a new offensive coordinator. You're going to have to that's the biggest hire of the Shane Beamer era is going to be this offensive coordinator hire, and he's got to nail it. Then you got to worry about player retention, things like that, because you have to imagine with some of South Carolina's really good players, there's going to be teams that are going to be interested there. And then you just got to make sure you nail everything with the coaching staff. So it's going to be very difficult, I think. But we'll see what he can do. But there's just so many things that this offseason that have to go right for South Carolina to get back, just because this season has just completely gone off the rails the way it has, coming in with the expectations, the preseason expectations that South Carolina had.
All right, so let's talk about the 2 4th downs for A&M to start the third quarter. It's 4th and 12 from the South Carolina 48-yard line. And look, the defense all season long, I think, and believe has played well enough, honestly, for South Carolina to have been undefeated. The defense has not been the reason why they lost a game. And I don't even know that I can blame it on them. Even though A&M went nuts in the second half, I think there are reasons for that are Shane Beamer-induced reasons, primarily because you just did not see the aggressiveness from South Carolina's defense, and that's just not their style. Clayton White is a gunslinger on defense. They pressure, they get up in your face, they disguise coverages, and I thought, and I don't really care what Shane Beamer says because he says a lot, and a lot of it is what is in his own reality. And let's face it, he's got to spin it for PR, for recruiting and the players and everybody else because he's trying to keep his job. But I just thought it was too much loose play, which led to big explosive plays because A&M has so much speed. Like, I don't understand why is Peyton Williams guarding Casey Concepcion in the second half. And so let's talk about the curious case of Jawan Howell, because that dude had been on a milk carton all year long, even though people on this podcast, Clint, if you're listening right now, I said at the beginning of the season, probably with you probably heard the same thing. The oldest guy in that building, which will remain nameless, but we all know who he is, okay, told somebody that I know, Jawan Howell, from the time he set foot on that campus, is the most physically gifted running back since Derek Squeaky Watson. Bro, that's a long time. And that's a lot of good running backs, including Rico Dowdle, who's in the NFL, and Marcus Lattimore, who, had he not had just horrific knee injuries, would have been in the NFL. And to me, this is even more damning on Marquell Blackwell, and that's why I think he's got to be out after this year. To me, I mean, this guy shows up, and all of a sudden, he looks like a stud running the ball. And then let's just put him back on the milk carton in the second half. Alex, tell me what in the world is going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of mentioned off the top, he flashed like three carries for 30 yards. And, to have that 10 yards per carry, like especially in the second half when, if you're going to kind of play that style of offense where you want to try to keep the clock running, he would have been a great option to put in there just because, we saw flashes of it last year. Like, he's a guy that, you mentioned some of his physicality and things like that. Like, he's a pretty explosive runner. And he's a guy that kind of like what we talked about with Matthew Fuller, it seems like he's always falling forward to get positive yards. And it was kind of just weird how this year you never saw much of him before this Texas A&M, or really any of them before this Texas A&M game. It was really a Oscar Adaway, Rasul Faison, Matt Fuller rotation. And then all of a sudden this weekend he gets in there and flashes, and in the second half you don't see him again, or you see him just very sparingly, which is really just odd. And I thought that's the running back rotation was just curious, but just because that's at that point in the game you're trying to run the ball and keep the clock running. Howell would have been a great option to put in, especially in that two running back set that we've seen South Carolina use a lot this year. That's worked with whatever combination. And Matt Fuller's been the main constant in there in that two back rotation, but those two looked pretty solid early on in the game. And I just thought that's Howell and maybe Fuller would have been the two to stick with in that run game early on, because that was just a weird kind of rotation there in the second half at running back.
All right, no doubt. So first, Mike Furry, they changed some things up. They had, new plays. We saw the little pop pass on the jet sweep action from Lenoris to Jaden Sellers, who, by the way, is a baller.
Yeah, he's gonna be
Okay,
good.
that dude, he has got the dog in him. Okay, he is better than Mazeo Bennett. Hell, I think he's better than Brian Rowe because he's more physical than Brian Rowe. Brian Rowe needs to gain weight. But in the second half, Alex, it seemed like Texas A&M knew exactly what South Carolina's going to do. I'm going to compare it, and I'm going to give Mike Furry credit, but I'm also going to be critical because he was like a pitcher that nobody's ever seen before, and the guy goes through the lineup the first time just throwing heat and strikes out 6 of 9 batters and gets 3 guys to pop out because he's just throwing fastballs.
Mm-mm.
But the second time through the lineup, or the third time through the lineup, they're sitting on that fastball and they're teeing off on it. And to me, he was a guy that was a one-pitch pitcher because in the second half, it was the same plays. It was it looked like A&M knew what was coming by the formation and the down and distance. And let's face it, they got a hell of a ball club, but South Carolina went from 312 yards in the first half to 26 plays for 76 yards. Now, granted, a lot of those were sacks by Lenoris Sellers, who had Mike Shula induced PTSD in the second half because he just froze. I mean, even on the last downs, he's got to throw the ball away. And on 4th and 16, you got to throw it up close to somebody and hope to get a DPI or let a guy go make a play. And it just didn't happen.
Yeah, and in the second half, I think A&M just adjusted to what South Carolina was trying to do. And, I think, in the second half, there were just some missed opportunities, too, from South Carolina. It felt like in the first half, South Carolina took advantage of those opportunities. The second half, you had some open receivers that, either Sellers missed. I know one on that third down, I can't remember who it was coming across the middle that just a complete miss on that third down. Even in the run game, I think there were some missed opportunities there that they had some holes potentially open that the running backs just didn't hit. So I think a lot of it was A&M adjusted. A&M started to really get pressure on the Lenoris Sellers. In the first half, I think they did a pretty good job of either getting the ball out quick of Sellers' hands or just other things that kind of help protection. But, you knew A&M at some point with Cassius Howell and those guys were going to be able to get pressure. And I think that just kind of completely changed. And then I just think, at that point, then momentum just completely flipped on the A&M side, and the pressure really started to build for South Carolina's offense when A&M's just going down the field scoring, and he just South Carolina could never, cut off that momentum or do something to get I think even a field goal at one point during that would have just kind of calmed everything down from a South Carolina offensive perspective, but they just couldn't get down there. And then, A&M gifted you an opportunity to either tie or win the game there at the end. With that play, which I still don't understand what that play call was that A&M ran on the goal line, but they give you the opportunity, but you really couldn't take advantage of it. And I agree, just you kind of on that last play of your Sellers, just throw it up there because at that point you have nothing to lose and you gain nothing from being sacked or running out of bounds or whatever. Just throw it up, see if you get a pass interference or see if you get some type of miracle play at that point.
So look, I get it. Beamer has got to spin it. But yesterday at the press conference, he was asked, well, really 2 questions. One, one of South Carolina's core values is, or one of the mantras of the program is to dominate the fourth quarter. And they have fallen apart in every fourth quarter. They have had the lead at Missouri. They had the lead against Alabama. So many, or it's been a 1-score game going in the fourth quarter. Every game, even at Ole Miss. Okay, you even still had the lead going into the fourth quarter at A&M. 30-24. And I think we are past the point that last year you had so much veteran leadership on that team. Like you had Vershawn Lee, who was the old hat on that offensive line, and Torricelli Simpkins, who's an NFL guy. Okay. On defense, you had so many guys, like not just Boogie Huntley and Tonka Hemingway and Nick Emanwari and DQ Smith and
D Knight.
Before the guys from the portal, like the
Oh,
guys that have been there, Bam Martin Scott, Debo Williams. Okay, you had all those guys, and then you got Demetrius Knight and Kyle Kennard out of the portal. I mean, the Bronco Nagurski Award winner for being the top player in the country on defense, and Demetrius Knight, who was a second-round pick and starts for the Bengals. And everybody's raved about him ever since he got to South Carolina, and even in the pros, dudes cannot believe what a leader he is and how he can diagnose what even their own team's going to do in practice, not to mention the other team. And look, I love J.R. Johnson. I love Justin Okoronkwo. Both of those guys are, I think, going to be just as good, if not better, than Demetrius Knight, because they're probably faster and more athletic than him. And you love Dylan Stewart and Brian Thomas Jr. And, but nobody hardly has played enough on offense because you got all those young receivers, and Nick Harbert's his first year. Rasul Faison's a first-year guy. Quite frankly, I don't think they should even have been playing that dude except as a third down back because of Howell and Matthew Fuller. You just you don't have the leadership on the offensive line. I mean, Boaz Stanley, I just don't know if he could even smart enough to come in out of a shower of rain. I mean, do you think that's a fair assessment, that there's just a lack of leadership on both sides of the football?
Yeah, that was, I'm sure we talked about it on here in the preseason. Like, that was one of the questions that you had for this team was, how do you replace all that player leadership? Because that's extremely important just because of what we saw. You mentioned all those guys last year on both sides of the ball. Last year, when you think about it, South Carolina lost to Alabama, and their kind of mantra was enough is enough and all that from how close they were being. You saw those players take ownership of that, and that's what led to that winning streak in the regular season. And I think that was a part of why they were so good in the fourth quarter or second half of games last year, just because those leaders were, some of those younger guys that they need to pick up along, they would bring those guys along. And, I think last year, I think there are just times where player leadership last year if there are times where things weren't going well, they would eventually say, all right, enough of this, enough of that. We're going to finish this game off. I just think this year they don't quite have that leadership just because they're a pretty young team overall, and they don't have a D Knight who's one of those important voices, a Nick Emanwari, a Kyle Kennard who step up into the room and say that. And I think that's going to be there's a lot of keys to this offseason, but from a portal perspective, that's something they got to look at is in this offseason, just to bring in more veterans who have that type of voice. Because I think they have guys who could be that. It's hard to do that when you're young, like a Fred Johnson or a Justin Okoronkwo or guys like that. Like, I think Nick Barrett, Monkel Goodwine, guys like that are, kind of the leaders of that defense, but you still need more. Just like you saw last year, you had leaders at every level of that defense and really of the offense too. So that's got to be a key to this offseason, is bringing in more of those guys who can be vocal leaders along with what they can bring onto the field. Just because last year, this type of game would not have happened just because the defense would have stepped up and just said, okay, enough is enough of this.
I mean, no doubt. All right, so yesterday at the press conference, Shane Beamer again was asked about, how do you come back from this? And Shane Beamer is like, well, this time next year, tonight we're going to be sitting there watching those college football playoff rankings because, we're going to finish off this recruiting class. We have unbelievable culture. We're going to retain our players. And next year, we're going to be in the hunt for the college football playoff just like we were last year. Well, I mean, easier said than done because, one, he's got to retain all of these good young players, and a lot of schools, especially if you lose that last one to Clemson and you're 4-8. That's not going to leave a good taste in anybody's mouth. I mean, let's face it, college football every year, it's full free agency. I don't know if he can do that. If he can, how attractive is the transfer portal going to be for a team that finished 4-8 and dead last in the Southeastern Conference? On top of that, clearly the guy that's making the evaluations for the transfer portal needs help because he's not Taylor Edwards. And I got nothing against him because he's had some key relationships that have helped South Carolina in different places, particularly with Landon Duckworth. And he's last year, after 9-3 and Lenore Sellers looking like Superman, that was the best chance Shane Beamer was ever going to have in his coaching career to go out and get a big-time OC. Like, to me, last year, dudes would have crawled to Columbia. They would have been hitting each other with a stick trying to get to Columbia to take that job. And he didn't talk to anybody. He just promotes Mike Shula, who, by the way, was the one guy that happened to have an infinite supply of kryptonite. I mean, that's a lot of stuff because to me, you got to get a new tight ends coach. You got to get a new running backs coach. I would be for keeping Sean Elliott. If it's a system OC, he's probably going to want to bring his own offensive line coach. I mean,
these next two games are huge for South Carolina. That sounds obvious, but you think back to 2 years ago when things weren't going well. They did build a little bit of momentum there at the end of the season to not make it to where it was a huge collapse of a season. They weren't able to beat Clemson at the end to get to a bowl game, but they're still able to build a little bit of momentum here in this one. Just with how the season's gone, if you can get to 5-7 in the season, that's obviously nowhere near the standard, nowhere near what South Carolina wants, but it's a whole lot better than looking at a 4-win season or things like that. And plus, having that Clemson win. But there's just so much in this offseason that has to go right for South Carolina. That has to be a nail in the head type of thing. And another thing you have to think about too is from a portal perspective is, are you going to have to overpay for some of these guys in their portal just because of the season that you had? It's easier when you're coming off a season like you did last year. You maybe don't have to overpay just because guys want to come play with Lenore Sellers. Guys want to come play with Dylan Stewart. And maybe that can still be the case in this offseason. But coming off of let's say it's a 4-8, 5-7 type of season, there could be a thing where you're having to maybe overpay a little bit just because some of these other teams are, especially the type of caliber players that you're going to want to bring in, they're going to have options around the SEC, around the Big Ten, and maybe you have to overpay a little bit more in that. So it's just, it feels like it's just got to be a lot that has to go right from a portal perspective, from a coaching perspective, with these offseason hires that to get to where Shane Beamer said that they're going to be back to next year.
All right, so Alex, obviously there's a lot of things left with these two games. I mean, if South Carolina loses to Coastal and Clemson, what do you think are the odds at 3-9 Shane Beamer is even back as head coach next year? And if he loses to Coastal, does he even get to the Clemson game? Because to me, I honestly, I would have already fired him, and I would have already been in discussions with James Franklin. Hey, if we lose to Texas A&M, will you take this job for X amount? Well, he's off the board. And he was waiting for something. Okay.
Yeah.
He was waiting for something better than Virginia Tech. He just was. But I digress. I mean, if Carolina loses to Coastal, what are the odds Beamer is back?
I just think if that happens, then let's say they lose the Coastal, and then I think you'd obviously expect a loss to Clemson just because of of that, and then you're coming off of a 3-9 season. Like you just wonder. I think things will get interesting just because you have to wonder like how do you come back from that in a year where even if you're, I mean, obviously the hot seat's going to be the talk next year, no matter how these two games go in the season. But then if you're a 3-9 coach coming to next season, like it's going to be. I say difficult, but even more difficult than what I think it's going to be just because of what all that has to go right. And I wonder how you come back from that if it's a 3-9 season, because it's just then you're going to have to worry even more about player retention, even more about having to overpay for players. Like it's just you want, and then you've seen it. Think back to this season in college football, some of these coaching firings that you saw with like a Brent Pry, Virginia Tech, like coaches that came into the season on the hot seat. Like it just did not last long into the season. So I think, it could get interesting if it's – I'm not saying that I know anything on that front right now just because that's a little bit down the road here in the next few weeks, I guess. But I just think things could get interesting just because if you're at that point, it just feels like it'd be really, really hard to come back from in 1 year.
All right, so let's also add into that equation. You got a new athletic director who's unveiled a plan to sell $350 million worth of premium suites, okay, which – it's a 10-year commitment, okay, to pay for those over a 10-year period. And, sales or pledged sales were going well. But over the course of the last few weeks, there have been people that have been bailing on that. How much do you think Jeremiah Donati has to weigh that in the equation of saying, okay, we're going to let Shane hire a new OC? First of all, how do you even trust him to do that? How involved will Jeremiah Donati be in that process? To me, I think he has to be involved just to keep Beamer from hiring somebody that nobody's ever heard of again, like Marcus Satterfield.
Yeah, from the suite kind of perspective thing and the stadium renovations project, like you would have, I do like to be coming off a really good season where you're easily able to sell those suites, but how difficult is that going to be coming off of a 4-8, 3-9 type of season? Just because, as you mentioned, that's type of a pledge type of thing from a multi-year commitment type of thing. Like how that you got to imagine that's going to be difficult. Like could a new coach be able to sell those types of things? Like that's where I think just things can get interesting if things just completely go off tracks here these next few weeks.
All right, so what if you win the last two games and beat what has been historically probably the worst Clemson team of this century? You go 5-7. Shane Beamer then, I mean, there's some spin there. There's some juice with the fan base for beating Clemson 3 of the last 4 years, even though these are not the Clemson teams that Will Muschamp was having to face, okay?
Right. Yeah.
Like, Will Muschamp is like the most unlucky guy in the history of South Carolina football to take that job. And then Clemson wins their first national championship before he's ever coached a game. And not only does Deshaun Watson roll, then you get Fabio, Trevor Lawrence in there with the Power Rangers, all the NFL guys on the defensive line, the skill guys. But that's still, any way you slice it, would be the first time of the Beamer era that the home team had won the rivalry game. And the first time since 2013 South Carolina has beaten Clemson at Williams-Brice and beaten Clemson more than 1 year in a row.
It feels like 2-0 has to happen for South Carolina to be able to potentially get back to where they want to be next season. Just because I think then, as you mentioned, there's a little bit of positivity spin in that. Just because I think then you could go out into the portal and say, "Hey, look what we did in the season, or what South Carolina did in the season." if you're talking to a potential Porter player, you can say you're that next step of you're our 2024 Kyle Kennard, you're our 2024 Demetrius Knight, and look what we did when we had those guys. That's where I think the positive spin can come. Now, that doesn't erase what happened this season, where that was just unacceptable from a South Carolina standard, and erase what all the things that happened. But I just feel like 2-0 has to happen as pivotal for Shane Beamer to go into this offseason, because obviously I think if you win the next two, I think Shane Beamer's back for 2026. But that I just feel like that has to. That's 2-0 is absolutely key, and and anyway, I don't think you can lose to Coastal Carolina, but then just that Clemson game later. There's just so many different scenarios in this that I feel like 2-0 is absolutely pivotal for Shane Beamer.
All right, so let's talk hypotheticals as we get ready to wrap it up on Gamecock Pod Live for November the 19th, episode number 1892. So I'm just going to throw out some, I'm calling these the killer bees because they all have B in their name. Okay. All right. Sonny Dykes is probably getting fired at TCU. Kendall Briles. Jonathan Brewer at Duke. Okay. Who is a guy that also has the air raid background, coached with Sonny Dykes at SMU, I believe. My favorite, and the guy that I thought should have got it last year, Buster Faulkner. Look at what that guy has done with Haynes King. I mean, Lenore Sellers is like, compared to Haynes King, is an F-18, and Haynes King is a Cessna. Okay. I mean, it's not even close. All right. Cade Bell at Pitt. Okay. Who is unbelievable. His dad, Kerwin Bell, who's head coach at Western Carolina. Jason Beck, who Lenora Sellers was committed to at Virginia and Syracuse with Anai, who was the offensive coordinator. Beck coaching quarterbacks, calling plays at Utah. For the record, Jonathan Brewer is at Duke. Mm-hmm. Buster Faulkner is at Georgia Tech. Cade Bell is at Pitt. All right, Brad Glenn, who has been with an App State guy his entire career. He was assistant at App State with Scott Satterfield, with Sean Elliott, and with Mark Spear, the defensive coordinator. He went with Mark Spear to Western Carolina. Then he went to Georgia State with Sean Elliott, record-breaking. Mm-hmm. Okay, now he's at Cincinnati with Scott Satterfield. And that offense is effective. All right, and so then maybe my favorite guy, only because he has three names. Okay, John David Baker, who has multiple years at Ole Miss and at Southern Cal with Lane Kiffin. He's at East Carolina. They've been putting up big stats. And he has three names, and he is a white male between the age of 25 and 45, which means he's a killer. Okay, he meets the profile of the FBI serial killer list. A white male between 25 and 45 with three names. Now, I'm joking. But South Carolina does need a killer. They need a shark. Mm-hmm. They need a ball coach. And so I'd be tickled to death with almost every one of these guys. Now, would some of these guys be my first choice? No, but Briles, Brewer, Buster, Cade Bell, John David Baker, even Jason Beck, who I don't believe would leave Utah unless he thought that Kyle Whittingham may be retiring, because he's 65. He almost retired last year. I mean, any of these names do anything for you, but more importantly, how involved do you think Jeremiah Donati will be? And do we really trust Beamer to get it right if it's just his decision?
Yeah, from that list, like Buster Faulkner would be the home run type of hire, but I'm not sure I see it just because I think he could potentially even get a head coaching job this cycle with how many potential jobs are going to be open. But then also, like, if he has the opportunity to come back to Tech, like with the season that they're having, I could see him just sticking around at Tech too. But from those guys you mentioned, like John David Baker, my personal type of favorites are John David Baker, Beck, and Cade Bell at Pitt. Like, I think those three would be really nice hires. And I'm kind of right there with you on Beck. Like, does he take the job at South Carolina just because he's doing a pretty good job did a good job at New Mexico, is doing really good at Utah? Does he want to take that job at South Carolina? So that's going to be interesting. And then I think John David Baker, he was one that was a little under the radar for me until I started to learn more about him here recently. And he'd be a nice hire too, I think, just because at East Carolina, he's putting up some really good numbers this year. And not only has it been good numbers, but it feels like it's been an improving number too at his time in East Carolina. His numbers from year one have improved in year two, and that's something that you want to see. It's not just a one-hit type of thing, a flash in the pan type of thing. He's improved numbers. So that's why those would be my three. I think Beck's really good. And Bell also. I mean, at Pitt, like, they're putting up some numbers too. Like, I think he'd be a very nice hire too. And he kind of does some of that type of stuff that I think South Carolina fans will like to see from an offense perspective, kind of getting away from some of the pro style type of stuff. Like, I think you just want to find an offense that's going to be a unique type of offense, like a college style type of offense, one that's hard to prepare for, not to go as far as what a Vanderbilt type runs with that some of their option stuff, not to go that type of uniqueness, but just something that's unique, that's more that a spread the field type of thing. And I think there's a lot of good candidates out there for South Carolina to look at there.
Yeah, I mean, all of these guys are good. Like even Kerwin Bell, he's a veteran. Okay, he's put up big numbers and won everywhere. He's been at Western Carolina. When they lose like 47-45. Okay, they are putting up points. And Brewer at Duke, he's got that Sonny Dykes air raid style, which is a spread up tempo. And we saw South Carolina go faster against A&M in the first half, and Lenore Sellers gets in a rhythm doing that. But to me, it's going to also have to be somebody that's coached quarterbacks that can rehabilitate Lenore Sellers, because he has PTSD, man.
That's, I meant to mention this with Beck, like, how much does his connection with Lenore Sellers play? Is that something that's attractive to him just from the recruiting process when he was at Virginia and Syracuse? Those two are very familiar with each other. Is that, we talk about with Beck and potentially staying at Utah, is that something that could, potentially get him, be attractive to him? And I think if you're Lenore Sellers too, like, obviously he has a good relationship with Beck, and obviously has comfortability with him there. That's something that would stand out, I would think, to him too.
So I'm going to add another guy, Robert Anai, who was the offensive coordinator at Virginia and then Syracuse. And then he made the tragic mistake of going to work for Dave Doran. But he could be your tight ends coach. That's the only thing. He's not a quarterback guy. Maybe he could be your tight ends coach, and Beck could be your quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator. They could do it together because they work together at Virginia and at Syracuse. I just don't know on that, but give me pretty much any of the guys will be in their name, and especially if it's a guy with three names, like a serial killer, John Wayne Gacy, all these guys. We need a killer. There's just too many lambs, it seems like.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think you see some of these names that could potentially be thrown out there, like a Beck. That's one that I think could fit. A John David Baker, I think, could fit that, just because, especially like a John David Baker type that's been at a group of five school and has put up those types of numbers. Like, you gotta have that in that type of personality. And a lot of these guys who could potentially are the names that are out there. We obviously don't know the Shane Beamer's list, but some of the names that are out there, I think you see some of that personality type of thing.
No doubt. And I love the fact, like, I love air raid guys that have been very successful because of the spread, up tempo. And I love Lane Kiffin, guys, because he is a mastermind. And this guy, he was the offensive coordinator and the co-coordinator before that with Kiffin at Ole Miss. I mean, he's been there, even at Southern Cal with Kiffin. And like you said, he's been, you know, in other places as well, Group of Five, and, you know, at Ole Miss as a coordinator. So, I mean, there's 2 games left. There's any number of scenarios. I mean, thank God you're not having to just play Clemson this week. You know, hopefully you got a chance to try to rehab coming off of just a devastating, and for South Carolina fans in the context of SEC history, that's always going to be there. You are the one team. It won't even say Shane Beamer. It'll say University of South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
So, Alex, great stuff. Signing day's coming up. Thanksgiving's coming up. The Clemson's game's coming up. I know you guys will have it all covered at the Big Spur. I can't thank you enough for jumping in and bringing the heat as usual. And if I don't talk to you before, happy Thanksgiving, my friend, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Absolutely. Same to you and everyone out there. Always enjoy being on.
All right. That was the pride of Hampton County, Alex Jones, and this has been episode number 1892 of Gamecock Pod Live and Gamecock Pod Daily. Last night on the Garnet and Black Town Hall, I think we were like in that Zoom call for almost 2 hours, like an hour and 10 minutes recorded. And then I think we had about a 40-minute overtime. And so we would love to have you be a part of our growing Gamecock family. New people are signing on. Seems like pretty much every week. Out of frustration, wanting to know what's going on with the coaching search. FAMs are joining for the women's basketball coverage. We talk about it all on Gamecock Pod Daily. It's hosted on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com. That's patreon.com/Gamecock Pod Daily. Hit the Googler, and it'll take you right to the link. You can sign up easy. You can get 7 days of monthly VIP subscription for free. Join us on the Garnet and Black Town Hall. Catch the daily podcast. It's the cost of one trip to Starbucks for a monthly membership. That includes weekly live interactive Zoom calls every Tuesday night. Just those 4 podcasts are worth the monthly subscription. So if you sign up as an annual VIP subscriber, you get at least 2 months free. If you sign up at the beginning of the month, you get 3 months free. So join our growing Gamecock family. Hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel so you get updated of when we're going live or when I'm putting up a rapid reaction podcast. We'll be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel right before Thanksgiving. Hopefully after the first Gamecock football win since September. Until then, go Gamecocks, and God bless all of you. I know it's been a very frustrating season, but it's going to be an interesting offseason, that's for sure, and we'll have it all covered right here. Until next week, God bless. Go Gamecocks. I am out of here.